one of the books he wrote was called The Cost of Discipleship. And one of the comments that he made in The Cost of Discipleship has stuck with me for greater than 50 years. And that's it. And that is, only he who believes obeys, and only he who obeys believes. Mm-hmm. That obedience and faith are inextricably linked. If you don't have one, you certainly don't have the other. Mm-hmm. And it's reflexive. You can't have one without the other. The old song goes. And I think when we find ourselves facing a cost to our faith, a cost of some kind, conflict, there's a social conflict, employment conflict, ethical conflict, a financial situation, we fall into the place of saying, well, am I going to believe or am I going to obey? We pretend like it's a choice. And as I said when I was giving my message, that I've had over the year acquaintances say things like, well, I was only doing my job, or well, it's only business, or it's just business, to describe why I'm able to do these things which would otherwise be unethical or immoral as a Christian. Well, it's just business. I was expected to. It's my job. I had to do it. And I think that flies in the face of not only biblical truth, but Bonhoeffer helping us to understand how that biblical truth comes to play in our lives, that only he who believes obeys, and only he who obeys believes. If you don't believe, you're not going to obey. Mm-hmm. And if you don't obey, it's pretty clear you don't believe. Mm-hmm.
Welcome to the Open-Ended Podcast, where we dive deeper than the Sunday sermon. It's a podcast about going from the milk into the meat. And this episode, we have a special guest. He hasn't been on the show before, but it's Pastor Scott Lemmon. Welcome to the show, my friend.
My pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me.
All right. So do you want to give a little recap about what the message was that you gave?
Sure. The whole premise of the message was based on that it costs something to follow Jesus. Mm-hmm. Certainly in the first century, there's plentiful evidence of the cost of following Jesus. There was persecutions. Both Peter and Paul were killed around AD 64 during Nero's persecutions of Christians. They were executed during his reign. Mm-hmm. There was a number of Christians that were killed, and we were in chapter 5, but in chapter 6 and 7, Stephen is stoned publicly for his faith after giving a fairly a stellar review of Israel's history and showing how Jesus fits into it. It made them really angry, so they decided the best thing to do is get rid of him. Yeah. They took him out and stoned him. And then, of course, Nero and his persecution. Nero had a fire. Well, Rome had a fire around the same time during Nero's reign, and it destroyed about a third of the city, I want to say, or 2/3 of the city. Mm-hmm. 10 of 14 districts were destroyed. Right. And it was blamed, and they blamed Nero and his building programs for that, and because he complained a lot that there was all kinds of stuff in his way, like people and houses. And then all of a sudden the fire starts in Rome and burns down everything that was in the way of his building projects. Oh. So they thought maybe it was his fault. So they started to blame him. And what do you do when you want to find a solution to that? You can either own up to it or you can say it was them. And the Christians were already not too favorably viewed by the Romans. The Christians were monotheistic and the Romans were polytheistic. They had a god for everything. Yeah. Christians didn't participate in their rituals. They didn't agree that Caesar was a god. So they were already kind of on the outs with Roman society proper. So when Nero said it was their fault, and like we can see, movements across the globe of people groups being blamed for either economic or social woes, all you need is enough of a reason to believe that they were responsible for it. And so they did. They did blame the Christians for the fire in Rome. And then Nero was free to persecute them as he wanted and did all kinds of horrible things to them. I mean, he sewed them in animal skins, lit them on fire to light his parties, tarred and feathered them. You read Hebrews 11, And you read the kinds of tortures that early Christians went through, and what their faith cost them. And I guess the one phrase that sticks in my mind, they were unworthy of being in the world was not worthy of them. But the phrase that sticks is they were sawn in two. That just has always stuck with me. It's like, a particularly grisly cost to following Jesus and saying, no, I follow him. Well, this is going to cost you. So Hebrews does a pretty good job of, if all you're concerned about is avoiding a cost, Hebrews would dissuade you from being a Christian, but they didn't. They followed Jesus anyway. And then, of course, in the 1940s, Dietrich Bonhoeffer, as a Lutheran pastor, rises to prominence in Nazi Germany, a lot because he opposed Hitler and was eventually executed for being involved in a plot to assassinate him. So he wasn't, he's not all silver cloud lining. Bonhoeffer had his own issues and was executed because of his desire to kill Hitler. But one of the books he wrote was called The Cost of Discipleship. And one of the comments that he made in The Cost of Discipleship has stuck with me for greater than 50 years. And that's it. And that is, only he who believes obeys, and only he who obeys believes. That that obedience and faith are inextricably linked. If you don't have one, you certainly don't have the other, and it's reflexive. You can't have one without the other. The old song goes. And I think when we find ourselves facing a cost to our faith, a cost of some kind, conflict, there's a social conflict, employment conflict, ethical conflict, a financial situation, we fall into the place of saying, well, am I going to believe or am I going to obey? We pretend like it's a choice. And as I said when I was giving my message, that I've had over the year acquaintances say things like, well, I was only doing my job, or well, it's only business, or it's just business, to describe why I'm able to do these things which would otherwise be unethical or immoral as a Christian. Well, it's just business. I was expected to. It's my job. I had to do it. And I think that flies in the face of not only biblical truth, but Bonhoeffer helping us to understand how that biblical truth comes to play in our lives, that only he who believes obeys, and only he who obeys believes. If you don't believe, you're not going to obey. And if you don't obey, it's pretty clear you don't believe. And we want to tease those apart as humans. And I was always fond of saying when students asked me about separating things, I said, well, all of you took biology and dissected frogs. I said, what happened? I said, well, the frog died. I said, that's usually what happens when you dissect things too far. They just die. I said, and now they're useless for anything. And so this idea of separating belief and obedience, although attractive, is really impossible. There's no truth left in it after you have dissected those two things. And so to say it's just business, well, then you're saying, I'm going to act the way that I want to act to avoid too much stress and strain, but I sacrifice my faith. And I think that's inescapable, even though we want to believe otherwise, because it's uncomfortable. And then I brought up the cost throughout history that probably millions of Christians, if the numbers, people have different numbers, and they all argue about the numbers of how many Christians were actually, executed for their faith, or there are political movements or social movements. However, in any case, millions of Christians have died since the first century. Gordon Conwell Theological Seminary has a kind of a repository for data, and their estimate is currently in the 21st century between 100,000 and 160,000 Christians a year are martyred for their faith. They die for their faith. So it's not over. We don't see it here in the U.S., and I'm thankful for that. I'm really not yearning for persecution. As I mentioned, most of my persecution has fallen into the "you really hurt my feelings" category, not a matter of being whipped or stoned or thrown downstairs or pitched off a wall or anything like that, as we see biblically. So I don't know if I'm an authority on persecution. So I wanted to make sure I quoted some other people who actually knew what they were talking about, and look at Hebrews and say this is what happened to these people, and then history with Nero saying this guy was a bad player, and then of course the Emperor Diocletian follows him, and he continues the persecution of Christians for quite a long time until finally Christianity becomes the religion of the kingdom, and that was later on. So, until that happens, the Christians were on the outs. They were meeting in catacombs, meeting secretly, because they couldn't meet anywhere else. They would have been persecuted to the point of execution and stoning. Of course, then Paul comes along, Apostle Paul, and in his early days, he's at the stoning of Stephen in Acts, and approves of it. And then he's going about murdering Christians right and left, finding the church wherever it exists. So, and then God does this Damascus Road thing with Paul and blinds him with what I thought was kind of interesting, because people say God's a gentleman. I said, gentlemen don't blind people on a road or on a trip, and then ask them why do you keep kicking against the goads? I'm trying to get you to go the right way, and all you're doing is like a dumb animal. You're just kicking against the stick that I'm trying to get you to move with,
Right.
And so we see these things of throughout history of Christians being persecuted for their faith. And just because we don't experience here doesn't mean there aren't costs. And then I brought up the idea of if you've ever been in business, if you've ever been in healthcare, at some point you wind up with some kind of conflict, ethical, moral conflict, and as you do that, you have to begin looking at saying, can I reasonably continue in this behavior of complying with whatever it might be, or do I have to say no? Do I have to finally take a stand and say no? I won't do this. So our costs in the U.S. may be more along the lines of ethical, moral, and religious objections to things that are happening in our livelihoods, in our communities, in our neighborhoods, than it would be, some organized group coming after us, or somebody like the Apostle Paul coming to basically to empty our sanctuaries and kill us all. So it just because it's doesn't fit the historical precedent, I don't think it doesn't qualify it. I don't think that makes it not qualify as persecution. I don't think we need to make a big deal about it and say, oh, how terrible it is for us. That's you hurt yourself, try to pat yourself on the back. But I think that to say there are no conflicts would be dishonest. And I remember an interview I did with one young guy, and we may ask a question about if he'd ever done anything in business, and he was an engineer, and we asked him a question about had he ever done anything in business where he felt like it was a conflict with his faith. And he said, "Well, yeah, there was this time." He says, and it's not. And he said, it's not uncommon. And my managing engineer told me I needed to falsify the results on an engineering test for soils. To get this thing to go through, that it wasn't dangerous, but the test was going to disqualify us. And I asked him, well, how'd you feel about that? He says, well, it was just my job. My boss told me I had to. And it struck me that with Bonhoeffer's equation of belief, and faith, and obedience, he had just said, I really don't believe. I mean, that's what he said to me, and I know that's a harsh judgment, but I tend to be that way sometimes. And it seemed pretty clear to me that he was willing to subjugate his faith to his security in his job, as opposed to saying, no, I won't lie for you. I mean, and then take the consequences for whatever it might be. I use my own example. I was a pharmacist in a university teaching hospital, 440-bed teaching hospital. And I was working nights. I was the only pharmacist on for a year and a half or so. And I got orders for an abortion infusion that would evacuate the baby. And the first time I did it, didn't really think about it, honestly. It was my job. I just did it. And then I got another order. Not too long after that. I thought, well, this now. And I did it again because it was my job and I was expected, and the pressure was there. And I was the only pharmacist on. It wasn't like I could call somebody else and say, hey, could you do this order? It wasn't anybody else. And so after the second one, when I went home, didn't sleep well. Several days later, I went to my director and said, I can't participate in these. I can't abort babies. And so I realized, and I wrote I'm a pretty good letter writer, so I wrote a letter to her and handed it to her. So I said, I have ethical, moral, and religious objections to this. I can't continue to do this. And I said, I realized that it's in my job description to do this. This is, you're not asking me to do something that isn't a legitimate job expectation. I wasn't trying to couch it that way. You're doing something unfair, because it wasn't unfair in the business sense. But it was unethical and immoral as far as I was concerned. So I told her, I said, I don't know what you'll do. I don't know what will happen. I talked to my wife and I said, I don't know if I'll have a job at the end of the week. I don't know what I'll do, which didn't make her very happy. But she was happy that I was taking a stand, just not happy that I might not have a job.
Yeah.
And surprisingly enough, not only did my director accept my objection and try to figure out a way to deal with hospital administration on my behalf, but actually defended the position of refusing to do these things in a much larger meeting later. And I was even more surprised when about 3 or 4 other staff members, I didn't make this public, but apparently somebody did. So 3 or 4 other pharmacy staff members, pharmacists, came to me and said, I need a copy of your letter. I was like, okay. Are you trying to get me fired? How do you want to? He said, well, we haven't wanted to do this for a long time either. We just didn't know what to do. So sometimes taking an ethical or moral stand allows others to take a moral or ethical stand that they wouldn't have. I don't think they were necessarily. They didn't have enough courage. I just think they didn't know what to do. But having a concrete way to say, I won't do this, enabled these 3 or 4 other pharmacists to say, I won't do this either. And one of the bigger problems in the practical sense was on the second floor of the hospital, we had a special care nursery, which was on the forefront of saving premature babies. We're spending millions of dollars a year saving premature babies, and literally on the other side of the hall, we're aborting them.
Yeah.
I said, this is beyond just my strange or peculiar religious objection. There's a real practical and professional objection that arises here. We can't hold both of these things in our hands. We can't hold the death of unborn children in one hand and then expect people to believe that we want these other kids to live. One of them is not believable. One or the other. You can't hold these two antithetical things in balance. And that's what they were trying to do. And eventually that program fortunately died out. And not that abortions aren't still happening, but there at least it changed. And so I think we find these places and it was difficult. I mean, I really thought maybe I would lose my job. I didn't have any illusions that my boss would go, well, Scott, you're a wonderful person. I want to keep you on board. So we're going to do everything. We're going to bend all the rules for you. I didn't have that.
And what came with it was all the anxiety and the fear back then that you had.
Yeah.
Like it wasn't just an easy decision.
I was working nights. I didn't sleep well anyway. And I was sleeping even worse after this. I was like, oh my gosh.
I couldn't imagine having to write that letter, what it would feel like in just turmoil inside.
So at some point, for me at least, there's things tip. I'll worry. I'll be anxious. I'll have bad sleep. And once I've decided that this is the right thing to do, then most of the anxiety and most of the fear goes away. Okay. Then it becomes a matter of how do I do this in a way that's, Peter tells us, give a reason for the faith that we have, but do so gently and with respect. So I always I don't try to be, strident in my objections necessarily. I don't try to be, hateful. I try to be respectful. Everybody has a different opinion, that's for sure. They may have good or bad reasons or no reasons for holding that opinion, but they do have different ones. And they're entitled to that, I suppose. And my job is to, as Peter said, make your faith known, but do so with gentleness and respect. So that's a biblical process and a principle to follow as you do that. So I wrote the letter. It wasn't like, oh, you're all evil sinners and you're all going to hell and the flames lick at your feet forever.
Yeah.
It wasn't that kind of thing. It was like I can no longer continue to do this based on, and I cited examples of ethical, moral, and religious reasons I couldn't do this. And it had the desired result. I was exempted from those things, and the program really suffered. So that was a big one for me. And of course, as we look across business, we see all kinds of things that we kind of go, that wasn't the right thing to do. We look at politics, that wasn't the right thing to do. Well, somebody has to say, somebody has to finally say no. I won't do that. And I was expecting somebody else to do it. I don't think I understand that as a human being. Then I have my own fears and insecurities, but I don't think that's legitimate. I think that at some point God says, this is your day. This is your time. You're either going to fish or cut bait. I mean, that's Lamonicus, notebook. You're going to have to decide what you're going to do here. And either you're going to believe or you're not. And you've come down to a kind of a point here where often we kind of operate in this kind of, it's kind of fuzzy and we're okay with fuzzy. But every once in a while we come to this sharp demarcation that says either you're going to say I'm doing this and it's wrong, or you're going to say I know it's wrong and I'm not going to do it. And you're right, that's uncomfortable. Yeah, and the letter had some intended effects, and we were able to move forward. I felt like I had done what I was supposed to do, and a lot of times in the Christian life, you find yourself as the watchman, and a lot of times the watchman's responsibility is to do nothing more than simply warn people about what's coming. But that is your job at that particular spot. And I found myself in a number of places where you see something or notice something. I remember there was a guy that I worked near, and people began kind of murmuring about him that he was having an affair. I went, well, but and all of a sudden at first it was just one person. I was like, oh, whatever. All of a sudden it became this general topic of conversation. So finally I just called him. He's a Christian brother. And I said, hey, I'm hearing lots of talk, but I think it's just gossip and awfulness. And I said, I wanted to ask you personally, are you having an affair with this person? Mm-hmm. And the silence on the phone was long enough that, God forgive me, I assumed guilt. And then when he started talking again, it was in a totally different tone of voice, and I figured he knew he'd been caught.
Yeah.
But it wasn't my job to say, "Oh, you're such a bad person." It was my job to respond with what information I had in a godly way, and to be the watchman to say, "You're in a dangerous spot. Yeah. This is not the right thing. If this is true," and I said, I didn't tell him I knew it was true because I didn't. Mm-hmm. But it's the watchman idea. So it's the same thing when something bad is happening in your business or in your hospital or in your neighborhood, in your community. Your job is mm-hmm. as a believer to sometimes to stand up against it specifically. Other times it's to be the watchman and say, this is happening, this is coming, and this is not going to be good. Mm-hmm. And to kind of refuse to be involved in that way. And I go back to Bonhoeffer. I said, you really don't believe. If you're not going to obey, what Jesus says, what's clear to us in the Bible, the English or whatever you're reading, in Spanish or Lithuanian, whatever translation you're reading.
Arabic.
It's clear to you. If you're not going to believe that, you're not going to obey that. You don't believe it. So you can't hold both those things. So that was kind of the upshot of the deal there. I think there's any number of things that we see in life that my comment to younger believers and everybody that I've been involved in discipling has been, if you don't think you have any ethical conflicts, just wait till you take a stand. Somebody will find those for you. It doesn't take much. Most of the time in our lives, we're a little bit ethically or morally adrift, and we just kind of go with the flow because it's the easiest thing to do. As human beings, we don't just go out and, well, unless there's something little wrong with us, we don't go out and just seek resistance. We don't go out just looking for a fight. We try to avoid conflict. We try to avoid resistance.
Do you not watch the news?
Well, there are, like I said, there are some people who like conflict,
Okay.
and I had friends in high school that liked to fight. That they would go out and look for, and I'm sure they still go to bars and get in fights because they enjoy it. I don't enjoy conflict. I don't enjoy fighting. But I think as human beings, normally and psychologically normally, we don't seek that. But the minute we take a stand, and I'm specifically saying once we take a stand for Jesus, to say, I'm a Jesus follower, then we begin to be the resistance to all the societal expectations, the expectations of business, the expectations of our profession even. We become the rock that's in the road. Mm-hmm. And we're not used to that. So we have to decide, am I okay with being the rock in the road? Because I'm not letting this wagon pass. Because I can't ethically, morally, or spiritually. So I think those are the kind of the underpinnings of why we have that idea of ethics, that it governs how we behave. And for Christians, it's, do we believe? John 14, Jesus tells his disciples, he who has my commandments and keeps them, he's the one who loves me. And he who loves me will be loved by my Father, and I will love him. I will disclose myself to him. So if we want a relationship with Jesus, if we want to know more about him, we want him to reveal himself, disclose himself to us, the New American Standard says, then we need to obey his commandments. Mm-hmm. We have to have them. Yes, we have to be taught. Or we have to read them ourselves, one or the other. So we have to accumulate that knowledge, but then we have to act on that knowledge. And we have to be obedient to that. Otherwise, it's pretty clear to me, and I try to do the thing with Scripture where I do the contrast thing, where he who has my commandments and doesn't obey them does not believe me. Mm-hmm. He's not in a love relationship with me. It's exclusive. You can't on the one hand say I love Jesus, but I'm not going to do anything he says, or I'll do the subset because these are really comfortable commandments, but these over here, these are really inconvenient. Yeah. I'd rather avoid these things. She said, he who has my commandments and keeps them, he's the one who loves me. Yeah. So if we want to be in that love relationship with Jesus, if we want to disclose himself to us, obedience is key to it. And that fits very neatly, I should say, Bonhoeffer's comments fit very neatly with Jesus' statement in John 14.
Yeah, I agree. A couple of things on that. It's so amazing to think about how different the world would be if we all just called each other's junk, right? And not like you said, to do it in a harsh way, but like, hey, instead of all of us talking about this over in the subset of the group, why don't we go and ask that
drinks,
person?
Yeah. Hey, about you.
Why don't we go and ask that person, hey, are you struggling right now? Can I help you with something? I find that I have to do that a lot in Celebrate Recovery also when I work with the men over there, because they're coming out and they're not doing the right things and they're wanting to do, like you said, follow the commandments and follow the laws and are praising Jesus and loving Jesus. And I know they're doing not quite something right. So I'm like, hey guys, I know you're on fire right now, but you're doing this other thing that's really, really hurting your stuff right now. So let's work that out.
Well, what's nice in a venue like Celebrate Recovery or a fellowship group of any kind, you already have the underlying thoughts that we want to follow Jesus. We want to be obedient. And in Celebrate Recovery, there's the tacit, explanation. I messed up. My life is not where I want it to be. That's why I'm here. Yeah. So it's not as if you're dealing with somebody who's kind of pretending to have everything together, and you're trying to say something to them about their behavior. You've got maybe a couple steps down the road already with these folks,
right?
That are saying, I know I need help. I know I messed up. That's why I'm here.
It's funny because sometimes they don't listen. Like there's quite a few people right now that are in my life that I know are in recovery and they're not going to recovery meetings. And I'm like 100% of the time when I see people stop going to recovery meetings because they think that they have it all figured out or whatever it is, man, they're going to go back out and relapse again. And I try to reiterate this anywhere I can. It's like, I have 14 years clean and sober because I go to Monday night every single Monday night. So I haven't taken a day off. Well, I mean, vacations or whatever. Miss it here or there for something. I always encourage those guys, at least one recovery meeting a week. Do something like that.
Well, and one of the questions you had presented to me was, what's the role of community, in the Christian faith?
Yes.
And it's just so clear. Paul writes the Ephesians in chapter 2, and he talks about how we're being built together into a holy dwelling, that we're all responsible for each other. We need to be built together. That's the whole purpose of that Paul talks about in 1 Corinthians about the body of Christ. There is the body of Christ. We're all a part of it. And it's essential that we rely on each other, the connections that are there, the nourishment that's there, the encouragement that's there. Sometimes the admonishment of saying, I see what you're doing and it's not right, the correction that comes. It's never comfortable, but I think within the body of Christ, we have to come to this kind of open acknowledgement that that's one of the reasons we're here. We're not here just for the fluff and the warmth. We're here for people to tell us, Scott, your attitude's kind of bad. Or I see you talking this way, and that makes me think that maybe something's not right. And within that, I don't give you permission to come in and invade my all my thinking and thoughts. That's not what we're talking about. Because the whole thing of letting you speak into my life, that always sounds a little sinister to me. That's just me. But I think we do give each other the express permission to say to me as a Christian brother, Scott, some even if you don't get specific, something's not right the way you're talking. I remember years ago there was a brother in the church and he we were talking, and what he said was just it was almost the way he said it more than anything else. Talking about his business and what was going on with his business and his secretary, and I get this awful feeling, and I didn't say anything because he was older in the Lord. He was much and knew much more about the Bible than I did. Had been involved for a number of years in all kinds of stuff, good stuff, and so I didn't say anything. And sometime after, he left his wife for a secretary, which is one reason why when I had this thing with these gossipy things about this other brother, that I just called him. I was like, I'm not letting this one pass.
It's experience.
I don't have any. If I had an excuse before, well, maybe he was just speaking off the top of his head or something. I don't know. But when that's happened and it's turned out badly, not because you didn't say anything, but you could have said something and maybe you would have had an effect. And you know that kind of indelibly kind of gets marked in the memory. And you kind of go, if this happens again. And so what happened is I just called that guy and said, word is you're having an affair with this, you know. I felt at that point, I almost didn't care what happened in the conversation because I'd done what I was supposed to do. Mm-hmm. I called him. You know, he's got a mind. He's got a heart. He can make a decision for or not for Jesus. I mean, I certainly can't control that. We can't deal with anybody. So it's, you know, but the role of community, I think, is not only encouragement to say, hey, let's push on, let's push ahead. Doing a good job, to recognize when people are doing well, and compliment them on those things. But also to say, something just doesn't seem quite right. Talk to me about what's going on. And have the expectation that will be received in the spirit that it's given. I'm not trying to judge you or get one up on you. I'm legitimately concerned that you're, you know, regressing on your path rather than progressing on your path. Mm-hmm. So, you know, I think that was all the questions you wanted.
That can be taken in a couple of different ways too. If you go to somebody and you try to tell them that, well, first it could be your tone. If you're a guy, you know, you got to watch the tone that you say it in, the words that you use, and then also that could be that person can snap right back at you, and you can be stoned, so to speak, for, you know, trying to say something, because they could go and they could start spreading lies about you throughout the congregation. They can just, you know, even if it is true, they can come back at you and persecute you and your character. But the one thing that we have to stand on is the Holy Spirit. He gives us, he's in our gut for a reason. He gives us that gut feeling for a reason. There's so many times where I've had that feeling also and not spoke up about something and then regretted it.
Sure.
Coming to learn and to trust that gut feeling. I think you're talking about a lot of it is fear inside of people. Not only the uncomfortableness of having to confront somebody and how that's going to be received or not received, you know, but just the uncomfortableness of doing it. But I think that the church would be so much better. Our community would be so much better if we would just do that in a loving manner, a loving way.
And that's the challenge. And, you know, like Peter says, with gentleness and respect, how you share your faith. Same way within the church, I think that we have to realize we don't choose who we're like. And Paul writes, Ephesians says, you're being built into a holy dwelling, brick by brick kind of thing. Peter does the same thing, talks about that we're being built in brick by brick. I don't get to choose the brick that I mortared in next to.
Yeah.
You know, mm-hmm. God is choosing that, and he's got specific reasons, mm-hmm. and he's smarter than me. Why he's doing that. So as God does that, it's not so much up to me to choose who I've got the conversation with, but to follow through in the conversation.
Yeah.
And say, you're here for a reason. I'm here for a reason. This is my perceived reason. Maybe more is going on than I know. But you're right. I think there's an element of transparency. There's also an element of honesty, mm-hmm. that we need to exhibit, and certainly realizing that we're not speaking from a position of perfection either. We've got our own, you know, suitcase full of stupid things that we've done and maybe are doing. It's hard to know, but you know. One of the things that there's always a caution about is that when you're going to confront somebody else, take a look at yourself first. It's the Matthew thing of the log and the log in your own eye. You know,
yeah.
Do you have a log in your eye? Before you want to correct your brother, are you going to whack him with a log that's in your eye before you try to get the splinter out of his eye? You know, I think judging yourself is probably a good piece of advice whenever you want to give advice to somebody else.
But we don't want that to hinder us from speaking out if we see something blatant, right?
Well, I think we always want to see if it's a personal issue. I think that we need to be very cognizant about who we are and how we're bringing that message. If it's a policy issue or a business issue, financial issue, those don't carry that kind of personal weight. They're no less important, I don't think, but they don't carry that kind of personal. I could offend you forever, kind of weight to them. If I question my church spending money on, I don't know, something, that doesn't carry the same kind of personal weight with me saying, I think you're having an affair. I mean that's a whole different bailiwick. It's like one of I don't know if either one was so much harder, but they certainly have different repercussions or possible repercussions. Like you said, somebody may decide they want to get back at you for what you said about them or to them, regardless of whether it was true.
Or even just having to step up to leadership in a church to you, that could have huge consequences. Consequences not only to the pastor or whoever it is, but think about the congregation that it's going to ripple down across, and the denomination and everything else that it could be rippling across. If we're holding up on all that to not correct somebody, but the Holy Spirit is telling us, hey, you need to. This isn't right. You know about it. It's not right. You need to step up and say something about it.
Certainly examining the potential costs, I don't think is a bad idea. Where I would disagree with its importance is whether or not that would be why you decide to or to not do it. Because you may say, well, the cost is too high. Based on what? So is it? You have to say, well, is it a real objection? Is this really illegal, unethical, immoral, unspiritual? If it is, I think you say this is going to be very costly. Jesus makes a statement: we should count the cost before you follow him. If you're going to build a tower, you don't want to build half the tower and be the laughing stock of the village because you couldn't finish because you can't make a budget. I didn't say that in the scripture, but that's what I inserted. You should have had your QuickBooks out, on your clay tablet. And,
yeah, exactly.
But I don't think there's anything wrong with counting the cost. I think you should. I think you should go in with your eyes wide open to say, these are the potentials that could result to me because of what I do. I don't think that should necessarily change what you do, especially if it's a clear cut instance of something that's illegal, immoral, unethical.
Sure. Yeah.
I think you have to act, but I think you act with knowledge. You act and you understand this is going to cost.
Yeah, don't walk up on stage on Sunday morning and accuse them to their face, right? This is
and then of course
there's ways.
Scripture has biblical avenues to accuse leaders. There's there's never just one witness. There's 2 or 3 witnesses, and you go to them privately first. Matthew 13. You have a problem with a brother, you go to him privately first. If your brother doesn't listen to you, then you get 2 or 3 other people to go with you who are familiar with the situation, and you confront him. Then you have an intervention. And if they don't do that, then you take him before the church authorities. So there is a cascade. There's a sequence of things to do. You're not just left to your own devices when you find something bad happening. The first thing you do is go to that person and say, I find this objectionable. I think this wrong on these.
And it's plain and simple. And it's easy. It's written out.
It's clear. It's not always simple. I like to think it's simple, but I think there's sometimes it turns into a big ugly mess.
Yeah.
But at the same time, that doesn't mean you don't do it.
Right.
When you find things that are out of line, then you have to deal with them. And churches are no less prone to illegal, immoral, unethical behavior than any other group of people anywhere else on the planet.
Yeah.
I'd like to think that's not true. I really would, because we're believers that we're going to hold these high standards, and there's never going to be a hint of immorality or illegality or unethical behavior. But the problem with any organization is not the organization itself or the bylaws; it's the people in the organization, no matter how perfect the genesis of that organization is. And the church is not exempt, and I think that's probably what we need to say. Church isn't exempt from these things because we have people, and we've in our own time we've seen these kind of spectacular failures of leaders that we probably all respected and all thought, wow, I'd like to be in one of his Sunday morning meetings. And they go, oh, maybe not. Guy's a creep.
Yeah. I like to think that the percentage though is low, not comparative to the congregation, to the church, to the leaders. And it's fascinating that you say that. Is that like Morris Hill, Mark Driscoll, all those guys? They started off as good leaders. They started off as good people, and then the further out that they got, that's when the morality and that maybe a God complex come upon them, and they're untouchable. And
I don't. Yeah, it's hard to know. Seeing some of those stories.
It is hard to know
what exactly happened, whether it was there all along and it was always a personality flaw, or what happened. It really is. It's very difficult. The fact that there was such a big failure just reminds me, and I think the first danger, like you said, people dropping out of recovery meetings, isolating yourself. Number one, when you stop talking to people and stop meeting with people, it doesn't matter that it was just inconvenient or you had something else going on. It should be a danger sign to you as the person who's looking for support, encouragement, and correction. That you said this whether or not I'm in a bad place, this will put me in a bad place. I shouldn't do that. And you look at these guys. They some of the powerful guys. They'd risen to places they weren't accountable to anybody except themselves. At least in their own minds. Of course, they were accountable to God in the end. But the accountability factor has to be worked into. That's kind of a daily, weekly, regular kind of thing. That's why the writer of the Hebrews says, "Don't neglect your assembling together, as is the habit of some, but encourage one another more, and all the more as you see the day drawing near Jesus' return." That we need that encouragement. We need that connection, not just for our own mental health, which I think is important, but for our connection of faith and obedience. So that continues they continue to feed each other. Our obedience feeds our faith, and our faith feeds our obedience. And the connection we have in community with other people help that to happen. It nurtures that kind of growth and connection.
So we all come in with something, unless you're, I don't know, maybe born at the church.
Born on the altar.
Yeah, born on the altar and lived through the church. We're all going to come in with something in our lives, especially if you're a human being. So, and that's one of the things that I struggled with for a really long time. And you had brought it up earlier in the discussion, is that I kept my mouth shut for the first, 3 or 4 years here at Faith Center, because I didn't know. I didn't know what I know. I didn't know what I didn't know. So I didn't want to say anything. I didn't want to give my opinion because I didn't know what the right opinion was. And so then fast forward 5 or 6 or 7 years, and everybody loved me, right? I was I just didn't disagree with anything. I went along with you, because half of the stuff that I would say in my head, I wouldn't let it come out of my mouth because it wasn't correct. It wasn't biblical. It wasn't, probably had a couple cuss words in there, had a lot of other stuff in there too. So I just chose to keep my mouth shut. But now, fast forward a little bit, and I've got a little bit more vocal. People are going like, Mike, I didn't know this about you. I'm like, well, I do have opinions. I just know how to articulate them now. And
well, I think the winsome part, if there is a winsome part about being somebody who's more vocal, more open, they're also willing to be corrected.
Yeah.
They're will. It's not simply a transmission. I'm not. I don't come to you and I vomit my righteousness on you, Mike, because I am so perfect and look at you, rags. You're rags of righteousness. No, I might say, hey, I see this and this bothers me, and you might come back with going, well, I don't know if I can receive that from you because I'm struggling with your behavior. They got to go, okay.
Right.
So now let's have a back and forth. Let's get this settled. Let's get this. Maybe we can be good for each other as opposed to me just deciding I'm good for you. I think that's a dangerous place to be. If I'm the guy who's always right, who's going to tell me?
Yeah, exactly.
So I'm not always going to be right. I'm married for a long time, almost 48 years. I've been proven wrong a number of times.
There's recordings of this.
Always irritating. Well, Leslie, I love you. But yeah, no, it's there are times you have to kind of go, yeah, I'm wrong. I hate being wrong, but it occasionally happens.
It's the most honorable thing. And this is coming up a lot in the discussions that I've been having in my life. And that's the type of people I like to surround myself with, is calm, cool, and collected, aren't going to get offended easily. They're not going to quick to anger. And that we all act with integrity, right? We're having a conversation. I know, and I don't know if it's because of my age. I'm getting older and I'm just kind of, I don't let things get me worked up quite as much as I used to. But I welcome correction. If I'm doing something wrong, it's because I don't see it. I'm honestly trying to work on myself really, really hard. So if I'm doing something wrong and I don't see it, yes, tell me, what am I doing wrong? And then I can decide, is it just your opinion that I'm acting this way, or is it literally...
Do you just not like this?
Yeah,
or is this a real issue
exactly.
of my faith? Yeah.
Right. Or is this biblical? But for a long time, I felt two-faced in the church because I was fighting the older person that I used to be, the strip club going, bar, poker playing, cussing type of guy that was stuck into this square hole. I'm a round peg and I fit in the square hole, but I still didn't fit quite right. You know what I mean?
A little wobbly.
Yeah. So until I got my feet under myself here, was kind of a little, I wouldn't say I was two-faced, but I was trying to suppress one life of mine and trying to grow in the life of Christ. I think that's the point that you're getting across there is what's his name? Schlesinger?
Oh, the German
author?
Bonhoeffer. Dietrich Bonhoeffer.
Yeah. I think that's the point that you're trying to get across is, yes, I'm have this in my heart still, but I'm still moving forward and trying to pursue my passion with Jesus and being obedient, love him more.
Well, in Romans, it says we're supposed to submit ourselves to be transformed in the way that we think. Yield your bodies a living and holy sacrifice, acceptable to God. Be transformed in the way that you think. I don't think that transformation happens all at once, boom, and you're done.
I wish it did.
Well, that would be shocking for everybody, I think. Probably for us ourselves more than anything. Oh my gosh, who's the guy?
What is this?
Somebody else in the mirror. But I think that transformation happens, but it does happen. It happens over time, and the more and more things. The one picture, the old little booklet that's been out for years, more than 50 years. My Heart, Christ's Home, little pamphlet InterVarsity put out. It talks about letting Christ into your heart, and there's rooms. So there's some rooms we don't let Jesus into right away because kind of want to. Those are ours, and we just kind of would hope he just mind his own business and stay out of that back room.
Well, maybe a lot of pain there in that back room too. Sometimes
maybe pain, maybe shame,
yeah.
Maybe some things that still attract me that I don't want to admit.
You don't want to give up yet.
Yeah. So I think that transformed thinking is a process, and I think what you experience and are experiencing is not unusual, and we shouldn't be too down on ourselves. As long as we can say, I think I'm letting Jesus know me. And this is one other thing I didn't talk about in the message, but One of my quiet times, I was reading that Jesus is at the judgment, and he gets to see these people who they cast out demons and they taught in his name and they did miracles, and Jesus says, "Depart from me, for I never knew you." Mm-hmm. And it struck me that as modern Christians, our whole intellectual bent, if you will, is to know God. We study the Bible, we read about it, we have conversations about it, we memorize Scripture, we go through the Bible over and over again to get to know God. That's not what Jesus says. Mm-hmm. He says, "I never knew you." Mm-hmm. And it was this kind of wake-up moment to go, wow, it's not just a literary exercise where I get to know all the facts about Jesus, and I know all about you, Lord. Yeah, but do I know you?
Yeah.
Do you know me? So in that quest to be known by God, there is that transparency. There is that openness to say, "All right, open all the doors." You kind of go, "Do you still love me, Lord?" Mm-hmm. He says, he hasn't left. That's the crazy part. Leslie and I were dating. We had what I tell all couples to have is what I call the night of everything. When you really are committed and you're gonna get married, you don't do this. Why second date? It's not speed dating, where you basically open up your closet and say, "Here's all my junk."
I wasn't quite sure where this was going, but I'm glad this is where it's going.
Yeah. Here's all my junk. Mm-hmm. Do you still want to marry me? And I can remember exactly where I was standing with Leslie, what I was wearing. I was on the San Diego State campus, wearing a shirt that she had embroidered for me, blue work shirt with a waterfall on the left breast.
Oh.
I was standing on a bridge that's no longer there. We tried to find it. Mm-hmm. Over a little pond, and I told her all my junk, and she stayed. And I think that has to be the same kind of way with Jesus, is that we have to be willing, because we'll never have any depth of relationship without that. We'll always have fear. Well, if she knew X, Y, Z, then she'd leave me. She'd never marry me. Mm-hmm. Jesus would never love me if he knew, like he doesn't already.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right.
But we pretend.
Yeah.
We've got it hidden in ourselves. So I think there's that element of, I'm going to have my night of everything with Jesus, and just, here it is, Lord, know me. David says, "Search me and know me. Mm-hmm. See if there's any wicked way in me." And I think that's an incredibly bold and courageous thing to do, but I also think it's essential. And I don't know how you will reach a sticking point. You asked me a question about what do you do when you reach sticking points? Mm-hmm. Well, you reach sticking points when you're unwilling to move forward, or when you don't have the propulsion to move ahead. Well, the reason you don't have the propulsion is because you really don't want to go past this point, because it's going to require that you be honest with Jesus about everything. And some people just aren't willing to do that. We can't control that. I would love to control that. I would love to, push people past those blockages, past those obstacles. But they have to decide, just like they did when they first said, "Jesus, come into my heart." Mm-hmm. Oh, well, yeah, but not that part of my heart. Mm-hmm. And I think that we have to be willing to ourselves to have that, like I said, the night of everything. It's all out. So you still want to marry me? And almost 48 years later, we're still together. So apparently, it wasn't a bad idea at all. It was kind of nerve-wracking and a little risky, and kind of going, what if I'll walk off this bridge alone? What if she'll want her shirt back?
I've done some crazy stuff like that in relationships, and I have done it on, I don't know, date 2, 3, 7. Didn't go as well.
That's pretty risky.
I know.
Wow.
I've always worn my heart on my sleeve and just let it all out. But you're so on point and right that doing that with God. Like he doesn't already know, for one thing.
Yeah, it's an illusion or a delusion to think that God doesn't already
Yeah.
know
What,
all of our junk. Yeah.
when I did it with God, it was, and I don't know if I just dumped it all at once or if it was over time, but I can like sit here today and tell you with full confidence, God knows everything about me. I've told him because I realized early on that the more that I gave to him, the more that he helped me through it, the better I felt when I released it to him. So I was just like, well, here it all is. God, help me with this stuff. Help me with this.
Hiding things takes an incredible amount of energy.
It does. Telling lies and hiding and being
saps,
deceitful.
it saps you to do all the other things you want to do. And you wonder why you're so tired.
Yeah, it does.
No wonder you're tired. You're spending all the time covering your tracks, either inside or outside. Yeah.
Exactly. And to be honest with you, I'm constantly working on things also.
Yeah.
I was given this analogy at Celebrate Recovery. Like I used to deal with some really dark stuff in my addiction, and I felt like it was okay. And then all of a sudden that started feeling gross to me. So it went down a little bit, and then that started feeling gross, and it went down this next section. And to the point where it's like where you are working on it yourself. Somebody on the outside would be like, what is this guy even doing? Why is he working on that? That is not even an issue. There are so many bigger issues out there. Well, I've worked through this enough with God that I've gotten to this point where this is what he's asking me to work on now. So it might not be a big deal to you, but it's the obedience to God that I'm going to obey it because he's asking me to, and he's making me a better person out of it. So we got to start wrapping up here, but let me finish off with something that's on a lot of people's minds. It's on my mind, and I experience it a lot. So in my Christianity, I work really hard, and it's already tough and frustrating, and I hit roadblocks and I get frustrated and et cetera. But what kind of advice would you give somebody that is facing burnout or plateauing and doesn't feel like that they're growing anymore?
Well, I think the first thing we have to do is adopt an eternal perspective. We're not in this for the short haul. We're in this for eternity and an open-ended time. So things happening fast, not necessarily
Little tiny space on Earth.
Yeah. Well, it's the whole idea that if you look at the giant brick wall, it's like our lifetime is one brick, and eternity is all the bricks. It's like it's okay. That's a pretty good picture. That we're being. This life matters. I don't want people to think that I'm saying that this life doesn't matter, because it does. Because critical things happen in this life that we're responsible for, and people that we're responsible to. But we're on an eternal timeline. So the changes that are happening in us, and the phrase that comes to mind is that dealing with difficulties or persecution, that these present troubles bear no relationship, bear no. What the word I want to say is, they don't hold a candle to the eternal weight of glory that waits for us. So, by adopting an eternal perspective, we say, yes, this is troublesome now, whatever it is, and yes, I'd like to quit. But does it compare at all to the eternal weight of glory that is pending for me and for every believer as we transition from this life into eternity, whether that's through our death now or through Jesus returning and meeting him, however that theologically aligns in the end times. Lots of opinions.
Lots of opinions.
Yeah, lots of opinions. I don't want to start that debate because I'm not smart enough. Plenty of smarter people that don't agree with me. So I think that we have to say, okay, present trouble, eternal weight of glory, and we have to say, okay, I am on the road to something bigger and better than I could possibly imagine. Even though this right now seems pretty uncomfortable and pretty painful, whatever it is. So I think that's part of it. But the idea of not giving up has its roots in why I don't give up. It's because of what I'm after. If I'm climbing a mountain just to get to the top, to say I'm the toughest guy in the world, and three quarters of the way up, I run out of oxygen, and I could kill myself to get to the top of that mountain to say, yeah, I made it. I'm probably going to go back to base camp. If I am running to get water to bring back to my friends in the desert who are dying of thirst, am I going to stop halfway back because I'm tired? No.
Right. Yeah.
So
That's a good analogy.
You have to kind of say, what am I pursuing? Jesus uses the kind of the parabolic thing of if a man finds a treasure in a field, he goes and sells all that he has and buys the field. Well, he doesn't sell all that he has because it's just some fun thing to do. I'll just sell all. No, he found something that is worth everything and more than he could ever imagine. And I think that eternal weight of glory, this eternity that's awaiting us, it's that kind of pearl of great price, that kind of treasure in a field that we're straining for. And sometimes it's more strain than other times.
Right.
But it's we're not just biding our time. If we're just biding our time, then yeah, eat, drink, and be merry. Honestly, Paul makes the statement: if there is no resurrection, then we are most to be pitied of all men. You know, and he's right. Why would we deny ourselves any earthly pleasure if there really is no resurrection? If there really is no judgment? If there really is no meeting God finally? Have a good time, because when the end comes, it's the end. But we don't believe that.
Right.
At least we don't believe that to the extent that we want to let ourselves just go entirely. But does that invade our thoughts? Sure. Because a lot of people believe that, and they operate that way, and we're influenced by people around us. We have to go back at night. We settle ourselves, or in the morning we have our time with the Lord and go, finding this bothers me. Would you reassure me through your word and through prayer that
that's good,
that eternity is waiting for me, that it's worth everything, that everything I have now, it's worth giving all that up to get with that pearl of great price, that treasure in a field, and believe that God's going to be good enough as a good father to go, yeah, I'll nudge you that way. I'll talk to you. I'll encourage you by the Holy Spirit to put one foot in front of the other, even if it's just 1 foot today, 1 foot tomorrow, 1 foot the next day.
It's good. That is good, because I hear about it a lot, and I get stuck myself, and that's great advice for those that are feeling stuck or plateaued. You know, there's more to it. I like your brick analogy too, where Earth's just one brick, a big old wall. Keep on fighting for it. All right, my friend, do you have any closing comments that you'd like to finish off with, or any kind of sage wisdom that you want to drop on us?
That'll off the charge extra for that, Mike.
Do you? Okay.
I guess in terms of the cost, you know, people always talk about the cost of things, and they'll price things, and they'll make their ideas about what this really is worth. And I guess when it comes down to following Jesus, it's worth it. And I guess maybe that's the deepest and most potent thing that I can say about following Jesus. No matter what it costs you, up to and including your life, it's worth it, period.
Definitely is. Those are great words. Following Jesus is worth it. How would you put that on a fortune cookie? Following Jesus is worth it. I think that's good enough.
Yeah, so you could count the cost, but infinity's hard on the calculator.
Okay. I like it. So true. Great message that you had on the weekend. And I think that it goes right along, obviously, with what we're talking about in Acts, the beginning church, and what we're going through. Because we don't, especially in America, we don't understand the persecution that happened back then, or even we don't grasp the vastness of the amount of Christians that were persecuted back then and what was happening to them, like literally being burnt for somebody's candle, to be somebody's candle, just is mind blowing to me. And then the fact that you stated that also, that I know we get so comfortable, we just forget about that right there, right? Or also the fact that we think that we're protected here in the United States and America, but look at how swayed we are in politics and everything else. And you're right. It's within a generation of having it happen to us also, just being swayed by whatever is there.
There was a quote that I hung on to and have hung on to for years since college. One of the speakers we had at our campus college group, his quote was, and he probably got it from somebody else. I don't want to just not misattribute it. The church is always one generation away from extinction, because we are the church. All we have to do is let it fall into disrepair, and we're one generation away from the church is one generation away from extinction.
I believe it. I believe it. Just in the generation that I've lived in, and seeing the generations before me and the generations that are coming up, and my generation, 100%, I can believe that. Absolutely. That's why we got to keep fighting. We were talking a little bit before, and I had to rewatch your video a couple times because I was actually doing the slides during your video. So it's a little bit hard or during your sermon, it's a little bit hard to do the slides and pay attention to what the guy's saying at the same time.
I'd rather have you pay attention to the slides, quite honestly.
Yeah.
I don't like it when they lag or it's the wrong one or something.
Oh, yeah.
So, yeah, so no. Yeah, it makes me happier.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's on me. I lag sometimes. Or I throw up the wrong slide like you're talking about, like I did on your sermon, because you had 2 QR codes. Yeah. One of them was for the Nero burning the city, and the other one was
Sanhedrin.
Yeah,
Jewish Sanhedrin QR code back to Wikipedia. So.
Yes. And what I did is I flip-flopped them. So anybody that was watching the video and scanned the QR code, they got Nero, a picture of Nero during the Sanhedrin.
He doesn't look Jewish.
What is Scott talking about right now? This is not the Sanhedrin.
My fault. I didn't give you both. I didn't give both QR codes to Amanda in the start. So that was my responsibility to give her both. I didn't delay. Could you still put this in? I was like, okay.
As the tech people, we love it when people give us slides at the last second, or pictures, or can you do this?
I figured that.
Yeah. No, it's good. And you also had was it a joke about the Sanhedrin? What was your joke that you told in the beginning of the sermon?
Oh, it was about the Sadducees.
Yes.
Yeah, because the Sadducees are one of the spiritual political groups in first century Israel, and the others with the Pharisees is probably more well known. Paul was a Pharisee, but yeah, the Sadducees. The Sunday school story was that if you had, and I asked people to raise their hands if they'd been in Sunday school because I didn't want to just bore the entire group of people that had assembled. But there's only about 5 people said they'd been to Sunday school. They're like, okay, I can get some mileage out of this. And I said, well, one of the reasons the Sadducees were having a problem with Jesus was because all of his followers were claiming that he was going to rise from the dead. And Sadducees don't believe in the resurrection. Mm-hmm. They don't believe in a life eternal, which is why they are sad, you see. and that's from probably 3rd grade Sunday school in Hanford, California.
You got a lot of laughs.
Yeah, that was, well, I think people were writing it down going, well, little theological note. Yeah.
That is good. Sadducee. All right, I am going to wrap us up. We're looking good. All right, everybody, thanks for joining us. And if why don't you tell us in the comments how you fight through that when you plateau or get stuck in your Christianity or when you feel it. And also, have you ever had those hard conversations with people? Have you had to have those hard conversations? You don't have to give us details, but just give us a comment and down below and let us know that you had that hard conversation.